We're live. Y'all can hear me? So hello, everybody. I'm sorry that we're starting a little late. We have been experiencing some technical difficulties, so please forgive us for that, but we are excited to have you all here today, this evening. My name is Brian Dixon Jr., and I am the Education Coordinator at Kinfolk House, and I just want to give you all a warm welcome. For those of you who don't know, Kinfolk House is a collaborative project space where the community and art converge, located in the predominantly Black and Latino neighborhood called Polytechnic Heights in Fort Worth. And today, Kinfolk House is thrilled to host a virtual conversation with María Elena Ortiz and Kandy G Lopez. I'll tell you that Kandy G Lopez is actually our current national artists participating in our present exhibition, Woven Together. And María Elena Ortiz is currently a curator at the Modern Art Museum, in Fort Worth. And we're just excited to hear from both of these amazing artists, amazing women of color. And before I pass it over to María Elena Ortiz, I do want to let you guys know that Maria is experiencing some technical difficulties where she is. So you won't be able to see her face, her lovely face, but you'll be able to hear her voice. So again, bear with us. This is going to be an amazing talk. Towards the end of the talk, please feel free to add any questions that you may have in the chat box, and we'll be sure to get to those. But again, welcome to the talk, and let's get into it. So Maria.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here. Kinfolk is an amazing project, and Kandy is also an amazing artist. So I'm just grateful to be here tonight talking to everyone. I apologize for my technical difficulties. If you want to see my lovely face, you can go and follow me on the gram at Contemporary Chica, where you can see me there, in flesh. Now, Kandy, welcome, and thank you for being in conversation here with me this evening.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for Kinfolk House. Thank you for the organization and all the people that have put this together and have also put the show together. Thank you, María Elena, for having this discussion with me, and I'm excited to talk about my work and hopefully get some interesting questions for the audience. I'm all about questions and I love answering them. So thank you.
So let's start from the basic. Like, what's your work about? And what do you do in your work?
So I'm going to share my screen so that you guys can see at least some of the things while I talk. So I am a portrait painter, or at least that's what I considered myself. But for those that know my work currently, I'm dealing with fibers. So I still consider myself a portrait painter, but I'm painting with yarn. And I'm painting specifically people of color, and that relationship that they have with the way that they present themselves is something that I'm really interested in. The narratives behind the people that I represent is also something that is important to carry through so that you feel a connection to the person that's being portrayed. Is something that I really enjoy. So I would consider myself a multidisciplinary figurative artist.
Now, you said that you mostly you're working out with fiber, which is what we also see at this current show in Fort Worth. But what we're seeing here is a painting, right? Like, what is this an early work?
So I wanted to give a little backdrop of, or a background of what it is that I used to paint. So I don't know if I should start with like how I got into art. Should I do that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So like most kids, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had a best friend who was Dominican and Puerto Rican. And I say this story all the time to my students just to let them know that like I wasn't born like a Da Vinci or any of the Ninja Turtles, right, during the Renaissance. Like, I really feel like I was taught how to create, but having the motivation to create is something else. So I mentioned my best friend because she decided to go to a magnet program. And for those that don't know what magnet programs are, It's a few hours outside of your normal discipline or normal school, or what, the STEM part of school, where you can focus on an art. So it could be theater, it could be music, it could be dance, it could be visual arts. So we picked dance in elementary school. Now, I loved contemporary art, hip hop, tap, but when it came to ballet, that was a problem. I appreciate ballet, but I can't do it. So when we moved on to middle school, we wanted to get into a magnet program as well. So I went to Norland Middle, which is in a low income, predominantly Black neighborhood in Opelika, Florida. And that place changed my life. Like, usually people talk about high school changing your life, but in reality, like, the identity crisis that happens in middle school really influenced my work, and feeling like I belonged in a place where that I belong in, like, in a space, because I lived in Hialeah. So I'm from Jersey. I moved down when I was 8 or 9, and we were in Hialeah, and most of the students and people that were around were light-skinned, Argentinian or Cuban, Caribbean people. So I still felt like a disconnect. So by the time I got to middle school, there was a connection there. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to give some context because, prior to Fort Worth, I was in Miami for almost 10 years. And, like Kandy was saying, Miami or South Florida is composed of different towns and cities. Opelika is a predominantly, historically Black neighborhood, really, with a very interesting history. And in Hialeah, that is right now a predominantly Cuban neighborhood where, like Kandy was saying, perhaps more light-skinned Latinos or Latin Americans or people of Latin descent live. And it's predominantly Spanish, so you hear a lot of Spanish, a lot of Cuban culture, and certainly those other types of contrasts that you see in Miami that you also see in a place like Fort Worth.
Right. So I discovered my love for painting while I was in middle school, which transitioned to high school, and really honing in on my craft. So really looking at the different types of paint application. This is an example of a work that I created during my undergrad. So I went to the University of South Florida in Tampa, Florida. And I got my BFA and also my BS. So my degree in marketing and management as a backup plan, right? Because I was still like scared and treading through what it is and what it meant to be an artist. And then during grad school, I had to explain to a committee that didn't understand the different cultures that come out of South Florida what swagger was. And that was something that was a little bit difficult for me because it's just something that came naturally, like you either understand it or you don't understand it. So trying to express that to a committee that didn't understand what that was a little difficult. So I got tasks or ideas like drawing neighborhoods, because a lot of my pieces looked like this one where it was just like a plain backdrop, which you guys will see in my current work, where some of them have the backdrop and some of them don't. So these are large scale paintings and drawings. So it's charcoal on Yupo paper. They're 10 feet by 5 feet. And they're composites of neighborhoods in Miami. So for high school, like I mentioned, I went to New World School of the Arts, and where that school was located, there was a lot of unhomed people and neighborhoods that you didn't want to go through. And I thought that it was important to document those neighborhoods because just like what's happening all over the United States now, they're being knocked down. The history behind the spaces are being repurposed, and it's become a real big issue in South Florida. So this is like a commemoration of the neighborhoods that don't get talked about when they think about Miami.
What I like about this image too is that it's a landscape or an urban landscape that can be seen in the Dominican Republic, in like the capital, Santo Domingo, or even in San Juan. I guess that Caribbean aesthetic, right, of the that regional.
Yeah, it feels like these cookie cutter houses that I want the viewers to feel nostalgic when they're looking at the piece. So my like preference in keeping it monochromatic, and also something that feels a little bit older was something that I enjoy and still enjoy within my work. So eventually in grad school, I really love to play around with different materials. It's something that it's like becoming a little scientist, so experimenting with how things work and what happens when you, I don't know, paint on tinted car or car tints in the background. So this is a car tinted background with paint on top, acrylic, and then there's charcoal on top of that, and then a print that's been cut out and put on top of that. So it's like playing around with materiality where you can like see yourself in the space. So this is 3 feet by 6 feet, so it's pretty big. And I took a picture, I don't have it here, but like I was peekabooing through the center so that you can see that it's a reflective surface. Or like even playing around with color and monochromatic was something that I was really interested in graduate school. And, you know, graduate school is a lot of reading and a lot of identity finding for me, because I went to Boca Raton, which is a predominantly white, upper class, older population in that space. So it was interesting to be creating works like these inside of that space and figuring out what it is that those viewers saw within my work.
It almost feels in this early work that you're negotiating between the figure, the portrait of the figure, and the context, which, you know, I wonder about what you said earlier about constantly having to explain where you're from to people and images that you know. What do you think about that?
I had one faculty member named Juana Valdez. If you don't know Juana Valdez, please look her up. She's amazing.
Look her up.
Yes, her art is amazing. Her concepts are amazing. And she was like that tough committee member that I needed to tell me like, Kandy, what the hell it is that what are you doing and why are you doing it? And have you read Bell Hooks? Have you read Michelle? Like how are these things influencing your work? Have you looked up other artists that are Afro-Caribbean that relate to your work or have some kind of connection to you? So she was the pushing force, like nagging me in the back of my head when I couldn't figure out the words and why it was that I was creating what I was creating. Because for me, I was just creating portraits of people that I found interesting. Like that was my thing. But I'm not taking responsibility for the people that I am deciding to make them immortal. Like these are art pieces. The art pieces will live for however long they live, longer than the people, like they'll survive longer. So thinking about that really pushed me. So she was one of the committee members that like put a little fire under my butt, if I can say that on here.
That's awesome. So then from here, where did you move to? Like, I guess, yeah.
I'll get back to this piece. So I wanna move into some of the prints that I created based off of some of the readings that I was looking through. So I read, and this was years ago when the book came out, The New Jim Crow. I think it's by Alexander Michelle or Michelle Alexander.
Yes.
And that book like really struck a chord in me because so my husband is Cuban, but he's also African American. Like his mom family comes from Alabama, so they have the roots there. And then his father is like really light Cuban. Yes, Brian, that book, life-changing for me, at least for my artwork. So I was thinking about the statistics behind the book and how the systems within the United States are really oppressive. And I feel like, well, I know they don't teach that stuff in school. So like you get this pretty idea of what history looks like. And yes, you learn about slavery and you learn about like the important people when it comes to art history, when it comes to history, but none of these images or the history behind these images were even showcased when it came to like learning art history in school. So I wanted to make work that would be part of art history for the people that come after me, and also like talk about these issues like the incarceration, like the percentage behind that, and what happens after you come out of that, and how you end up going back into that space because of the way that the system challenges you, brings you down, oppresses you. So
oppresses, yeah, the history of like, you know, oppressing Black bodies of color, right?
Right. So this is a series called Mass Incarceration, and these are screen prints. They're monotypes, so it's a one-off image. And I bought the frame specifically for what it is that I wanted to make, and then I made the figures from that for the frame. Sorry, my AC is like super loud. And there's 5 of them. And then there's also a ghost print of each image. So this one looks a little blurry versus this one, which is a little darker. So we have this idea of like fading away inside of this cage that has been built for these Black bodies. And at the same time, I was also thinking about how these kinds of systems also get us stuck within our own neighborhoods and like not having the opportunity or resources to get out of those spaces. So a lot of times my work has a power lines in them to connect the figure to power. So like literally lighting up the city and lighting up the space, but also as a way of like entanglement, being stuck in a space, feeling like you can't get out of that neighborhood no matter how hard it is that you try. And thinking about, like these cage spaces in the background, and also texture. So now is when like I'm thinking about how this would look like if it was 3-dimensional in some format.
So then, how did you from there get into working with textiles and fabric? I can definitely see, like as you're saying, even in this print, that it almost like alludes a little bit to a cloth piece, right? On the street, for example.
Yeah. So in 2016, I got a full-time position at Daytona State. And not 2016, in 2014. So right out of grad school, I was blessed and I got a full-time position at Daytona State. And while I was there, like I was fresh out of grad school. So I was still, usually people are burnt out by that point because you're just making and creating and reading and not really sleeping. But I had a studio space to myself. I had a storage space to myself, and it was huge. So I'm like, Kenny, you got to take advantage of this opportunity. Like you need to start making. So I was creating prints, but I was also cutting out those prints and piecing these cityscapes together, thinking about texture within some of the images that I was using to create these spaces. And also like relating it back to the drawings that I was making and playing around with materiality. And then one day there was a string that like, and this is what happens in the studio, the string falls on one of my pieces. And I was like, oh, duh, I don't have to draw the power lines. I could just create it with the string. So then the string became something that was important in my work. And then I went to Michael's and there was a sale on thread. And there was a little piece of canvas too. And I'm like, oh, that'll be interesting if, you know, the people that I'm creating, since I'm talking about swagger and clothing and confidence and like putting on this armor so that you're seen in a space where you feel invisible. I used that and I made a really small one. And then the small one, and they were bad. And then the small ones turned into large ones because I wanted to get more detail on the face, which is where we get this. And this is at Kinfolk House now. And I really enjoyed this, but it just felt like, yeah, I could make this faster in the painting. Like, instead of thinking about putting yarn on it. So I left it alone for a while. And I went back to, go back over here. I went back to like my traditional way of creating. So making something look like what it looks like. So this is color pencil with gold leaf in the background. And these are small, they're 11 by 14 inches. This is another version of that. And then I got married and we bought a house and I was like, okay, well, if we're gonna have children, like this is the time to have children, because I got a full-time job at Nova Southeastern University, which is where I'm at right now. And I couldn't paint anymore. And I wanted to make big work. And I couldn't print because of the solvent. So I'm like, okay, well, I started that yarn. Maybe I can get better at that technique. So I tried it again in 2018, and that one was okay as well. And then I had a few years of like being mom. So I'm like, I need to dedicate my time to being mom. I was still creating collaging, like doing this piece and still thinking about the idea of liberty, and what that means inside of these neighborhoods in South Florida. So going through these places and taking pictures. I also incorporated Jersey over here because I used to visit Newark all the time because I'm from Bayonne, which is right next to Jersey City in Newark. And then I got a residency in 2021. And I'm like, I'm going to make these pieces, and I'm going to make these pieces with color in them, which was something that was new for me because most of my work at the point of grad school was monochromatic. And the minute I turned one of these figures into color, that was it. I was like, oh, this is going to be fabulous because I can now play around with color as if it's paint. And also thinking about like the structure and the anatomy within the figures was something that I enjoy.
So walk us through in terms of like what's the title of this work, what else should we mention, and what exactly are we looking at? Because it don't, sometimes when you look at the image, it feels like it has like multiple layers, but
Okay.
that's not the case, right?
Right.
And,
So,
and I want to say thank you though for sharing that, because I think that especially as women, like we have to negotiate so many things, like work, career, motherhood, partnership. So I really, I enjoy how you've narrated your story, negotiating all that in a very, not in a very romantic way or mystified, but in a very real way of how do we negotiate things and the way we make work, because of how we're dealing with life.
It's a lot because like you want to be mom, right? Because you decided to do this. And you also have the role of wife because you decided to do this, but you're also an artist. Like I couldn't leave art behind, even if I wasn't making big pieces. I was at least like cutting things out and trying to use watercolor and doing, colored pencils while she slept or while I was breastfeeding because I needed to make, because there was too many ideas in my head. And it also makes me a happier person when I am doing what it is that I want to do. And it's a lot. You have to juggle your job plus the art plus all these relationships. So this is Sue, and Sue is a Jamaican American, and she is my husband's best friend's wife. and she has swag like no other, and her fashion sense is like amazing. And I asked her to pose for me because I had this idea of creating two of these during a residency that I had in Hambidge, which was in Rabun County, Georgia. And that was the first time that I left my baby. So she was maybe she was 2 years old. So that guilt was something else because the residency was 2 weeks. So as a mom artist, you also have to think about how long are you going to go for? Are they going to come with you or not? And can your partner hold it down, right, for you to be able to go out and do what you need to do? Luckily, I have a fantastic support system. So my parents are here in Miami, they're close, and his parents are also here. And he's always saying yes to any of the ideas I have, which is nice to have somebody that like understands how important your career is to you. So this one is 8 by 5 feet. It is made out of yarn. The figure is made out of yarn, and the background is on a plastic mesh, which is also called like hook rug mesh or plastic canvas. So it has little holes in it. I wonder if I have like, I don't think, yes. You can see like the little holes. I think I have a closer, yes. So I usually start off drawing the figure on the plastic mesh, and then I start with yarn, and it's usually the face. Like I really love working with the face. The face is what takes the most precious time, and it makes me the most frustrated because I want it to look like the person. And I think that's why I keep creating more, because I don't feel like they look like the person. So I want to try to get as good as I can to make it look like the person. But so the whole body is made out of yarn, and then the background is painted. So I have to put a sheet of paper behind so that when I'm pushing the paint into the holes, it's not painting on the wall, which is where you get this image. So this is Yupo paper. So I end up finishing the body, and then I lay it down or I pin it on the wall, and I paint the cityscape, or sometimes I spray paint around the body. It depends on what it is I want to communicate. And then I let that dry, and then I remove this whole thing, and it looks like this. So when you put it on a different colored wall, you get a different sense every time. And if you put it by a window, the background fades. So, and I think I have a picture of that. So you can see it at the Kinfolk House, right here. This is fun. So depending on where it's installed and how it's installed, it changes things. And the meaning also changes. So she's like fading into the background, but also the background's also being showcased on the side. So it kind of looks like a reverse image, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It also takes you to like a very like almost like church, like a religious type of, with the light, it kind of has that like aura to it that adds like a more dramatic layer to the work, right?
Yeah.
They sound labor intensive, and right now there's a lot of artists. Like I started thinking about people like Lisa Butler, who also works a lot with textiles.
Yes.
Like, in her case, like there's this whole like tradition and learning from family and so on. But I also find it interesting that in your work, you went to textile because as the moment that you were in your life, the new mother and so on, this quote unquote woman's work, right?
Yeah.
Was so easy, and so it was easier to do in the moment that you were in your life, which I find interesting. Just the way textiles and fabrics relate to the woman's body or just to a specific moment, right?
And that's something too. Like my grandmother was a seamstress in Dominican Republic, and she like made doll clothes. She made my prom dress. Like she showed me how to crochet, even though I forgot. So, you know, I got to go on YouTube and learn it. But the sewing machine, thread, yarn, I didn't know that when I was creating it, but I'm like, oh, there's a connection there to my grandmother. And there's also a connection there to the island because she contributed to the carnival and the masks that were part of the carnival and the clothing that some women will wear that was part of the carnival too. So it's a nice connection there to family and origin.
Yeah. Now, this one is also in the exhibition. What's the title of this one, and also what are the dimensions, and what's her story or their story? I also want to add that I think I really like about the individuals that you portray is that they are not like this monolithic idea of Blackness. They'll all have a certain, you know, they're Jamaican American or there's something else. Like it kind of pushes against the stereotype too of the Black experience in the U.S., which I find it enriches the discourse too.
Yes, intersectionality. So this piece is Marley. Marley is my cousin. She was born in Dominican Republic and she moved to Queens when she was like 8 or 9. Her father immigrated here first. So the kids were on the island until he got himself situated and then he brought them over. And not only did I create this to talk about island people and immigration, and also swagger, right? So it's telling her story, but also talking about gender. So she's a lesbian and she identifies as female, but she's also masculine in her presence. So one of the things that I really enjoy when people look at works like this, where they think that it's a particular gender, but in reality it's the other, I like telling the story because it flips the brain to start thinking about other ways of representation and what a human being can be and what it means to be an individual and different. This is 8 by 5 feet as well, also yarn, but the background was spray painted. And like, again, the paper was put in the back and then I spray painted around the figure. I do not tape around the figure. I have maybe like 2 that I have, but I get lazy as an artist too. And I just want it like done because I want to see it. So you'll see some of the spray paint marks in the background where I'm like moving around as I'm spray painting. And usually these pieces are supposed to be placed on the floor in front of the yarn pieces that I create because I want people to interact with the piece. I also want to send a message of what we do to Black bodies in the United States and also in the Caribbean, right? When we talk about colorism. And I don't think I have a close-up of that, but there's like footprints that you can see on here because I've used this for other exhibitions as well. So as they're being exhibited, there'll be more and more, hopefully, footprints on them where they can like be placed on the wall like this one is. And this is also Marley and her brother. So again, my cousins. And this was one of the first times that I've used 2 figures in one space where the figures were not complete. And where they do, like it's intentionally not complete and not whole, but also fading into the background. Like there, but not there.
You know, I look at these images and I just find it fascinating that, you know, like you were describing at the beginning of this conversation, how nobody knew what swag is. And so much of American culture is driven by Black culture. So I keep thinking about how that happens, right?
Right.
Yeah. But then this image here, who is she?
So this is Mello. Mello is Dominican. She lives here in Miami, and she is also a lesbian. And I met her during an art talk that I had in a gallery in Pembroke Pines here at the Frank Ortis Gallery. And the minute I saw her, I'm like, who the hell is that? So sometimes, like, I don't know the figures, but I try to introduce myself, just so that I can get to know them, so that I can commemorate them in a piece, because there's some people that have like this aura, or this confidence, this presence that I like can't help but not look at. And I enjoy trying to figure out how to put their face on this plastic canvas with yarn. For me, painting has become easy. So once a material becomes easy, I move on to another type of material or medium, which is why I'm with yarn, because I still haven't, and it's not like I perfected painting either. I can't say that, but I would like to perfect my figurative work with yarn. And
Got it.
until I get there, I feel like I'm going to be creating yarn portraits for a while.
Now the installation at Kinfolk, like, it seems like you worked a lot with the space, right? With the kind of placing your works in direct dialogue with the architecture of the house.
So Jessica Fuentes, Jessica, I think you're the curator there or director. I want to say yes.
Yes, I'm the
I think you said
executive
that.
director.
She sent me a layout of the space. So they have like this 3D modeling, which you guys should look up. I put it on my Instagram. I also put it on Facebook, of Kinfolk House. So there's 2 other exhibitions where you can like walk through the space and see the works that are being displayed. So I got the opportunity to be sent that, or to view it. And I was thinking about how some of these works would fit into that space. But in actuality, like, Jessica is the curator, so she decided where certain things would be. I was really interested in placing some by windows because I wanted to see how it changes from where they were, which is at Project Row Houses. And those were like specifically around windows, and then some weren't. I wanted to see the difference in space and how that would change the image. So I can't take all credit for that because Jessica's awesome.
I will say that you did give us, the directive as well about the Marley piece, that you wanted people to be able to see it from the front and from the back. And so I was originally thinking that would go in the middle of a room, right? Like that was the first logical thing that came to my mind. But as me and the team, Brian and Alexa, were installing the work, Alexa, who's our PR and marketing coordinator, had the idea of putting this in the doorway, and it just worked so well.
Yay, Alexa and Brian. Thank y'all.
It's a team effort.
Team effort is always the best. So how many works are in the show?
That's a great question. Like, I should know the answers to this. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 pieces.
And then I was also wondering, I guess your experience kind of going into Kinfolk, which is such like a cool space, right? And placing your figures there. Like, how was that experience for you?
It was amazing. Like, I really enjoyed Texas. Like, to the point where I'm like, hey, husband, how cool would it be? We can, like, because
we need more of that marketing for Texas out there.
No, like it's really nice. People are super like nice and friendly. It was just a really warm environment. And I also like the history behind Kinfolk House and learning about Cedric Huckabee and his mom, and how he transitioned that space into a place where the community can see themselves in a space where they usually wouldn't in like a bigger gallery or bigger museum. And I really enjoy the community aspect of it. I like that people can come to this space and it feels like when you're in the space, it feels homey. Even there's some furniture that's still there, which I enjoy because that makes it feel more lived. White walls.
Yeah, it's a beautiful building.
I'm excited for their future plans.
Yes, me too. Me too. So what are we looking at right now? This piece that you have you're showing us.
Yeah, so this piece is 12.5 by 7.5, so it's pretty large. And this is Marley and Lewis again. So I use a lot of their images. Like they came for another cousin's wedding, and I'm like, I need to take a picture of y'all because the relationship is really sweet. And he's a little brother and she's a big sister. And I've also, so my kids, I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son, who are like super mixed. So I really liked the relationship that they have going on. And I also come from, it's 4 of us, so it's nice to have like that sibling kind of bond. And with this piece, I was really interested in creating a background that was also fiber, but not yarning, if that's the word, not embroidering the whole piece, but thinking about the location where I'm getting the materials from. So this is part of a residency that I did in Wyoming, and I wanted to create this piece for Project Row Houses. And I'm actually working on a second one now where the background is Black and there's 2 other figures within the space too. So it'll kind of be monochromatic like this one. And the repurposed fabrics, I went to the Salvation Army that was in Wyoming, close to the residency, and I picked curtains and shirts and pants and t-shirts and button-ups that were monochromatic, and I brought it back to the studio space and started figuring out how I can create a city with just using fabric. And that was the first time that I did that. And I really enjoy that process because it's kind of like collaging, but I'm collaging with fiber onto a background where the figures were there already. So like I started off with the figures and then went into the background. So like you can see like the little curtain holes that are there. This is like one of the parts of the button-up t-shirt. This is a jersey, like a sweater. Another part of that curtain. And some of the
Oh, go ahead.
and some of the like I really like when things start like curling and like falling apart, because it kind of goes back to the cities being demolished and reinvented to create these, you know, high sky rises, and it feels worn and pieced together.
I find interesting how at the beginning of this conversation, you know, you talked about like context separate from the figure, and this new body of work, you're kind of merging 2 together. So it reminds me of those first combination of those first drawings with portrait painting, but now combined here in a textile. And I also want to make a note about figuration, because I think that right now there's a lot of buzz with figuration, and some people say, you know, that there's a lot of it out there, but people forget that figuration, Black figuration in the U.S. and American art history is something that is over 100 years old. And it's something that artists always go back to because it goes to the essence of the core of this art, like seeing ourselves, representing our bodies, reflecting on how our bodies are in community in a given time. It's something that has a historical continuum that is important to continue doing it, to continue, and artists are going to keep thinking about it as a source of inspiration.
Yeah, I enjoy very much the figure. I've enjoyed it since, you know, middle school, like 6th and 7th grade really pushed me into doing the figure because it was something that was hard for me. Like we were, you know, doing still lives and we had dark rooms, so there was photography and it was always a figure. I wasn't taking pictures of like landscapes or cups. I was taking pictures of my family members because that's what was interesting to me. And also trying to like capture them in an image is something that I enjoy, which is what pushes me to try it in different mediums, because once I'm like, all right, I know how to do this through paint, let's do something else.
So we've been talking for a while, and now I just want to give an opportunity to any audience member or anybody here with us tonight to ask questions. Is there any questions? Brian?
I'm going to start as we wait for our audience members to kind of gather their thoughts and whatnot, because your boy is very excited to ask his question. And where do I start, Lord? Help me. Goodness. Okay, I have a question for you both. If this is okay. And so my question is, what are some challenges you have experienced while advocating for diversity and racial equity? And then this is a two-part question. What are practical steps you take to heal from racial battle fatigue?
Do you want to answer that first?
Okay. Sure. So the first one being, what are the challenges that I guess I face dealing with fighting for supporting racial equity and diversity? I'll say this, like in my work, I am attracted to things that, you know, for better or worse, reflect some me as a Black Latina, from Caribbean, you know, Spanish Latina, and then there in the U.S. So those things are, you know, diverse things, right? I don't know what you are. There's always, and I worked in places like Miami, now in Folk, where I was working in Mexico. It really doesn't matter where you're at. There's always going to be growth. And I think that for me, it helps to understand that resistance and hesitation sometimes towards change at times has to do more with people's own aversion to change, because change is hard, even in our personal life. So I try to really think always more about the global picture and thinking about like small victories and trying to not be afraid. And I think that people are very receptive to learn. And sometimes, and that's something that I've learned a lot, you know, in my previous experiences, that people just want to know. And the more you share, the more you put yourself out there and be a little bit vulnerable in that state, people welcome that. So I wouldn't get discouraged. In terms of the fatigue, how to deal with the fatigue, you know, I got really healthy and have a community of people. Like there's colleagues and artists and other people that I talk to, frustrated, they don't always happen, no matter the spectrum. There's always going to be frustrations, but having a good network support, and also being very forgiving to yourself, and knowing, I'm not going to build Rome in a day, but today I did something meaningful. I think that's important. And I also say this, I think that also as people of color, especially as Black women, we put a lot on ourselves, and we're harder on ourselves than anybody else. So for me, it has helped to acknowledge that, and that sometimes nobody's putting demands on me like I am, and trying to, because other people don't do that to themselves. I'm sorry, right, but I don't see men or like certain men, demanding to do so many things as we do it. So I think that keeping it real and keeping it humble and helps me. Yeah. And also, like, looking back, like, things were not, when I graduated from school, like, there wasn't as much interest in these conversations as there is now. So now the world is different, and we should take advantage of that. But never forgetting the fact that power is never going to be given to you, and people are always going to want it back. So you always have to be working towards. It's not a done deal. It's a process, and I think that also helps. Kandy.
I think one of the things that was a struggle, and sometimes still is, depending on people's ages, is that I'm young. And I feel like because I'm young, people have an idea of what you know and what you don't know. And they bring that up often without even considering your experiences and what you've gone through. So that's something that I feel comes up a lot when it comes to my work, and also when it comes to other things in my life, like the teaching aspect of that. And yes, we are harder on ourselves. Like, I always get questions like, Kandy, how are you doing all of this? Support system, like, build that support system. Guilt will take over, and you would put yourself in a hole because of guilt instead of asking for help. And sometimes demanding help to be able to do what it is that you need to do or that you're passionate for. And education is something that I am really big on. Teaching people about different cultures and the history behind those cultures too, especially in art history, is something that I push constantly. And I'm not good when people say no, because I will keep trying until what needs to be done gets done. So no, like, lights a fire under me too. I don't know if that answered the question, Brian.
It did. I'm excited to look back and watch this video. But we do have some amazing questions from our lovely audience members in our chat here. And one of the questions is for you, Kandy. It says, you have swag. Have you ever considered using yourself as a model?
I don't think I have swag at all. Like, at all. I don't think I have swag. I think I'm not that nerds can't have swag, but I don't consider myself to have that. Maybe others, but have I considered putting myself in my pieces? I've done so many self-portraits. I'm so over my face. So I don't see me doing like a fiber piece of myself. For now.
For now. That's a positive outlook. For now.
I'm trying.
Okay. We have another question, and it says, how do you not get paint on the sewn piece when you are painting the background?
I do. I get paint on it. And if you really pay attention, like, and you're really looking at the pieces, you'll see like there's blue on the side of Marley's hand. There's some like blue in the hair. I am also not a spray painter. So learning that aspect of art, or the quality of that, has been interesting. Right now, I'm like spray painting on the grass in front of my house, because I like the ephemeral effect of that also fading away and becoming a piece that I can just document. Yeah, I don't know why I said that, but yeah.
Okay. We have another question. It says, I am curious about how you talk with your children and family members about your work. What relationship does your 4-year-old have with your yarn? And this person is saying, I am an early childhood arts educator, so can't help but to ask about that.
That's a great question. So I have a studio on campus, but I also take over the kitchen space because we have like a larger wall. So I take the works down because of course I have art in my space. I'm taking people's pieces down and putting my pieces up, and my kids see me as I work. So, pick them up from daycare, they have their dinner, dad's home, so dad will watch some TV with them, while I work for a few hours before it's like the nighttime routine. So they're playing with yarn. Like, I have balls of yarn everywhere. They cut it, they try to like make, little spaces, because we have like a little table, like an arts and craft table, close to our kitchen. So they're also making art, and they like understand, like, mommy's working, mommy's making art. And my daughter, who's 4, critiques my work. Like, she is on point with critique at 4 years old. She'll be like, Mom, she doesn't know that it's called an angle, but she's like, her eye is not where it is supposed to be. It needs to be a little bit on this side. And I'm like, you know what, you're right. So she'll see me like redoing the stuff. So they're involved, and I think they enjoy being involved in creating.
That's beautiful. Start them young.
Yeah,
Start them young. She's going to grow up and be an amazing artist.
that's what she says. She says, I'm an artist like my mom. I hope it stays like that, because you get older, and mom is like for a few years, you don't want to hear about your mom.
So we actually don't have any more questions from our audience members, but I do have one last question for you guys, and this is for you both again. I'm sorry. And my question is, what is the best mistake you have ever made?
Damn, that's a good question. If you know what it is, Maria, you could go. I'm gonna think about it. Maybe she's
Probably
also
getting
thinking.
pregnant, I would say. It's such like a big change, but it's good. But I am just joking. I don't know. I mean, I like to take chances. So, and even when I look back at things that, oh wow, I cannot believe I did that, I feel like there were good decisions to make.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to think about that. It's a good question because I probably a bunch, because I feel like sometimes I do things and I'm like, oh wow, and then I feel like, oh, I should have done that, and it's like, oh great, that worked perfectly. So like this toxic thing. I'm like, oh my God, I have an awful situation with the connection, but it was a great conversation. So I guess that's the perspective that I use.
That's true. I feel like I make a lot of mistakes or happy accidents in the studio. Like, there's some things that I mess up on, and then I look down, I'm like, oh well, that's interesting. Like, I can use that for a piece. So I think a lot about Bob Ross when he's talking about, there's no mistakes, just happy accidents in the studio.
Exactly. I
Right.
agree. Like everything is an opportunity for growth, and we never stop growing. Never.
Yeah, I think you guys answered that well. In fact, that was that was my aim, for that question, because I think a lot of times, as well, me being a young artist, I recently graduated from TCU, and sometimes, we fight with ourselves about not making a mistake and being perfect all the time. I think as creatives, we have that struggle. And sometimes you have to embrace the mistakes, because sometimes it's the mistakes that open room for curiosity, that allow exploration, that allows experimentation. So that's kind of what I wanted to get at. And again, you guys hit it right on the nail. So everyone, let's give Kandy and Maria a virtual round of applause. We can't see you all, but put some love in the comments. Again, we just want to thank you all for participating in this wonderful talk with us. To Maria and Kandy, thank you so much for bestowing us with your wisdom, talking about your work, and just sharing yourselves with us. We're grateful and honored by you, and we look excited, and we're looking forward towards future things that we do with you both. And you guys, that's the end of this virtual talk. So again, thank you. You ladies, if there's anything else that you would want to say before we close the live,
I
please.
want to say something, because the educator in me is now like, okay, what can I give Brian to do for the happy accident? So during grad school, we were giving a task to make an art piece that's considered a failure. Make a failure piece. What does failure look like in a piece, whatever it is? If you're doing 2D or 3D or virtual or whatever, what does failure look like? And you'll be surprised at the things that you create. So that's your mission as an educator. I wanted to get that out there before we close.
Okay, well, expect an email from me with a picture of my piece that I go and create. In fact, all audience members, this is a challenge to you all. Let's all do it, and let's all have a conversation about it in the future. But Maria, did you want to share anything before we sign off?
Just saying thank you to all. I'm a pleasure to be here. I love what everyone in this conversation does, and so I'm just looking forward to more collaborations and to continuing the conversation. So very excited, and hope that everybody has a good night's sleep tonight.
You
Yes.
too.
And again, if you want to see my face, Maria Chica on Instagram, and then there you'll get to see it.
Yes. Yeah, speak those future collaborations into existence. They're going to happen. So again, thank you both. Thank you, lovely audience members. And Alexa, I'm going to pass it on to you to go ahead and shut the live down. Everyone have a great night. And be safe. And come visit us at Kinfolk House,
Thank
1913
you.
Wallace Street.